The Las Piedras River Basin is so incredible.
You don't see the untouched very often. You don't see it anywhere in the world anymore, really.
And the Piedras really is one of the last great, wild, unbroken rivers in the region. And as a result of that, it's incredibly important, particularly because it's unprotected.
This forest is incredible, and even in the Amazon, you don't realize it when you're far away. We learn a lot about the Amazon rainforest, and it's so big and so vast, it goes on endlessly. There are very few areas left that are undisturbed.
Really, there aren't that many great, wild, intact landscapes left.
It just has so much life wherever you look.
This place has got, you know, some of the most interesting species that I've ever come across.
The wildlife is so pure.
You can hear it all the time, you feel it all the time. You feel life.
It is one of the last great wild places, and perhaps one of the last great special places.
The jungle itself, like, just brings people together, connects people. It's also so lush and green, and the noises and the fresh air all the time. It's just a place where you can just wake up in the morning and it doesn't matter what time it is, you don't feel lethargic, you don't feel anything, you know. You get up and you're so happy to be here. It's just a place where, you know, the magic really happens.
In my experience, having traveled to frontiers around the world for the last decade plus, in trying to understand what's happening to the forest, what I've consistently seen is that when forests are destroyed, people often have a lower quality of life. There are several different forces that threaten the integrity of the Piedras watershed. I'd say the primary one is its adjacency to the Interoceanic Highway. This is the first highway to connect ports in Brazil in the Atlantic with ports in Peru on the Pacific. So essentially goods can be shipped to these two ports much faster.
The Interoceanic Highway was one of the most detrimental things that ever happened to Peru and to the entire Amazon. It's also created access to these untouched areas. A lot of the immigration that is happening into the Piedras and specifically is because of there's more access, the Interoceanic Highway and all the roads that have developed from it.
And Madre de Dios is essentially in the middle. Just because they're next to the highway, which allows quick transport and the soils are productive, means that those forests could be converted to vast plantations of whatever crop you can imagine.
Just being here on the ground, you see new road networks, new chakras pop up literally daily. I'll leave, put up camera traps, got like a 400 square kilometer study site where I'll be walking and then I'll come back and there's a new road. It happens that quickly.
And more people are moving in and starting agriculture on the river.
Del Bray nosotros venimos donde que sembra mucha coca y la gente creo que está muy cansada porque hay mucha corrupción, otras cosas más.
Yo vine mayormente allá en Valle Apurímac IN, no tenemos terreno, no hay suficiente terreno para poder trabajar y bastante delincuencia, bastante corrupción en ese lugar por zona cocalera, por el tráfico y por eso mayormente nosotros nos venimos aquí. Claro, era medicina natural, ¿no? Pero ahora ya no, bastante tráfico mayormente sale de eso.
Cocaína es sumamente peligroso en el mundo, creo, ¿no?
Bastante delincuencia, pues bastante animoso con eso cuando quieres hacer muchas cosas. Puede ser cualquier cosa con eso, a matar gente o violación, cualquier cosa, muchas cosas que se puede hacer con ese la droga, ¿no?
Del Bray llevan mucho a Estados Unidos, de Lima a Estados Unidos mandan, por barco, sí, con muchas cosas más, con el producto de tal vez pampa, otras cosas más, productos adentro. Mucho química, tal vez ponen cal, querosene o gasolina, otras cosas más. Por eso la gasolina en Bray está sumamente prohibida también venderse. El galón de gasolina está a 30 soles.
Sin esa contaminación de las gasolinas, químicos muy usables para ese narcotráficos.
Por eso la vida del Bray está muy fregada ahora, demasiado.
Como hemos visto eso, preferimos buscar un espacio porque tenemos hijos haber un espacio y plantar nuestros productos para mantener a nuestros hijos.
Y la gente migraron acá a Puerto Maldonado y tienen esa mentalidad de sembrar mucho cacao.
Solo voy a plantar mucho cacao en grande chacra y vamos a vender ese producto para otro país para que hagan chocolate.
The strategy for conservation is so complicated.
The people here need to make a livelihood, and all around the world people have made their livelihoods for the past thousands of years by cutting down trees and by logging. So I see it as a necessary form of life. But I do see that the way in which it's done is less of a thought process than we're used to. It's done with the knowledge that what they're doing is unsustainable, but it's in order to get the most amount of money at one time.
When we first created our reserve a year ago, Kayo, who's one of the key people in the community, who is awesome, I really like him a lot. He helps us out with boat rides, and we visit his farm, and he's always given me a whole bunch of fruit, which is awesome. So the first time I went to see his farm, he was busy clearing it and burning it, and it's like, you know, probably half a kilometer away from our reserve. And so we walk out into this just burning wasteland with like these massive trees, and then in the distance they were cutting down more of the forest, and so I just heard this massive tree, you know, it was probably a Dipteryx, just sort of you know, and I mean the tree literally cries as it's falling. I mean it's pretty emotional. And Kayo put his arm around me and he's like, "Mira David, qué bonito, sí o no?" Like he thought that this was beautiful and this was progress and this was something special. And he's right, because he's going to grow, and he is growing, you know, an amazing fruit farm, which he and his family are going to thrive from. And so, you know, internally I'm thinking and wanting to burst into tears, but understanding human on human. We're all different and we're all here for different reasons.
Aquí es libre, tranquilo, que puedes respirar el aire puro. Aquí es más libre. Sí.
Without a doubt, the most disgusting thing I've seen is the state of the landscape after gold mining in the Madre de Dios region. Because not only do you lose the trees and all the vegetation and all the wildlife, but you're also disturbing the soil in such a way that, you know, it really ends up being vast areas of desolated desert and squalor. The river systems are totally polluted with mercury.
Basically, to get the gold to coagulate and come together away from the other heavy minerals that have fallen out during the mining process, you use mercury. And mercury is a persistent toxin in the environment. It generally doesn't go away. It bioaccumulates in the tissue of small organisms that are eaten by bigger organisms, and eventually we eat those organisms, so the mercury gets into us.
We have many studies that have been done over the last few months which show, you know, 3 or 4 times the legal standard of mercury within fish, some of the fish species, that many people consume in Madre de Dios. And so that affects pregnant women, transferring that to their children through birth, children being born with defects, stunted growth.
I've also noticed with mining that it tends to attract some of the more unseemly things of society. It attracts prostitution, it attracts violence, it attracts corruption. All of those things are massively amplified when you're dealing with gold mining in particular, because there's so much money to be gained.
En Madre de Dios, habiendo minería ilegal, informal, que es de donde están establecidos campamentos y donde hay explotación y trata de personas.
I've had my trips to the mining camps. It's not a nice experience at all. It's kind of scary, actually.
You go into these mining camps and the prostitution is just, it's incredible. These young girls, 15, 16 years old, out in the open. It's there, it's blatant, and it's happening. And you can just sense that there's no law there, that it's a dangerous place to be, that if you live there, you should have a gun. or you might get killed.
The people that are working in the mines, because they're not supposed to be working there, and it's all run by these basically large gangs, people die. 8 to 10 people die in the mining camps every week.
Certainly I hear those stories that it's a lawless place and the barrel of the gun rules. The mistreatment of people, both of workers in the pits as well as the women, whether they're in the kitchen or as prostitutes, it's really horrendous.
There is so much money being made by gold miners, excavating the earth, destroying the forest, and ultimately they throw their money around on all the vices that you would typically throw around when you're in a town like that, which is alcohol, drugs, sex.
Sin conocer la Amazonía no conocemos cómo es el contexto ni cómo es la idiosincrasia y cómo es que muchas mujeres son llamadas de cierta forma porque en la selva es como que todo permitido, ¿no? Entonces hay una vulnerabilidad a tener un tipo de trabajo que no es bueno para ellas, pero al conseguir el dinero más rápidamente, pues se queda en ese lugar.
Especially with the children, many of them who were sucked into the process without choosing to take that path. They were lied to, they were manipulated, and then they find themselves out in the middle of nowhere with no one they know, having to do something they don't want to do.
Las características son primero pobreza, que son la mayoría son mujeres pobres. El segundo, que son jóvenes, 13 años. Otra característica es que no tienen familia. Hay un desarraigo, ¿no? Ellas han salido muy jóvenes de sus casas, incluso trabajando en otros lugares. Lo último es que siempre han trabajado desde niñas y que existe pobreza. Y no solo en esta, sino de las ciudades de donde ellos vienen, de donde vienen esas personas. Entonces, al no conseguir un trabajo en los lugares de origen, sus lugares de origen, migran a diferentes ciudades como esta a conseguir trabajo y pues es lo único que encuentran.
The corruption that flows from the mining is a real scourge. It's damaging to the government, both at the local level, the federal level, in terms of its effectiveness of getting anything done, because people are more interested in getting paid. It also damages the legitimacy of the state, in that the citizens just don't believe that the government can help them or has their best interest in mind.
La política contra la trata de personas en Perú es aún, a mi parecer, pobre todavía. No se ha logrado avanzar mucho. Solo en pocas regiones existen casas, refugios, albergues. Lo segundo es que hay poca asignación del presupuesto en el tema de lucha, de combate contra la trata de personas. Entonces no hay ningún tratamiento específico para estas mujeres. Entonces la idea es romper eso y decir que no es que sea normal que hayan mujeres en la selva que están haciendo un trabajo, en realidad están siendo explotadas.
The ills of the environment are really often indicative of social ills. What happens to the forest happens to us. What happens to us happens to the forest. And the forest is a gateway to seeing yourself and other people more clearly. I can tell you, every time I go to the forest, I have major breakthroughs and I always leave happier.
I've seen hundreds of volunteers come through, students, young people, old people, who've had this massive transformations just from being in the rainforest. You know, I've seen students with ADHD and they come out the other side, you know, different people, more calm, collected. I've seen people with depression come out of the rainforest, completely calm and collected and kind of more centered.
It makes a really big difference in people's lives that have come down here and are given that opportunity and that kind of break from the outside world. And it makes you kind of think, like, why did we get to this place where we're so separate from it? And the other extreme to that is I've seen people come here with more extreme problems, like, you know, mental health issues and you really see a difference in people when they leave.
All my life I've suffered with depression. I was out partying a lot, drinking a lot of alcohol, and then I decided one day that I was going to join the army. I joined the army 2 days after my 18th birthday. I thought, you know, I'm in the army, you know, people are going to like respect me because I'm here, and you know, I'm going to kind of be looked at as kind of the better person instead of like the guy that's not going to get anywhere in his life. And I went to Afghanistan in 2012 on Op Eric 16. The main thing that really upset me was the fact that I saw a lot of dead children, and I had very bad nightmares about children, recurring nightmares about them dying and me killing them. I had people die around me, and I had a lot of very horrible things going through my head at the same time. It was just horrible. My friends, and you know, they're like my brothers, were all getting shot at, and I had a few people in the regiment die, and it just made me realise that this is horrible. This is hell. I left Afghanistan and I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was as a person. I would cut myself and I would talk about suicide, and I had a failed attempt at suicide. It doesn't even seem that bad when I talk about it, but in my head is just constantly going through these things and constantly torturing me about all these things. And instead of doing something stupid, I decided to see if I can change my life in any way. Put myself in a completely different environment, put myself out of my comfort zone to see how well I'd actually do. So I went to Peru, and there I realised that this is where I need to be. I'm so happy here with what I have, with who I'm with what I've seen, with what I'm doing. You know, mentally I'm much more stable. It's still a very difficult task for me because I'm always going to struggle. It's always going to be a challenge. But if I was to be in England, I probably wouldn't be here now, if I'm honest. And still to this day, I still think about suicide. I still think about self-harming. But the reason why I don't do it is because I got like offered another chance through this jungle. It kind of is like a therapy for me. It's kind of like a medicinal place. I have so many things that I want to do, and I have so many things that I need to do as well. It's good because I actually feel like I'm part of something here. The only reason that I'm here and the only reason that I'm like who I am now is because of this place. It's a reminder every day. As soon as I wake up and I hear the monkeys, or I go out on a long walk and I collect camera traps, and you know, we look through them and we see some awesome stuff, and I see, you know, amazing animals, so many different species and all these things. You know, it's just a constant reminder that I'm pretty lucky. I'm a lucky person. Probably one of the luckiest guys alive, I reckon.
I think we have to remember at the end of the day, if we're going to solve this, we have to remember that all environmental problems are social problems.
We need more people to come out here so that then we can eventually save this place.
And we need to act in our lives, whether our lives are directly involved in this challenge that is the loss of life on Earth, or it's indirectly through the things that we buy, the decisions that we make.
And you have to look at the bigger picture as well. And we need a lot of people to make that bigger picture even bigger.
There's no change without involving all these different aspects around you, and one wildlife conservationist isn't going to save the jungle. It's going to be a concerted conservation efforts between all these different parties and stakeholders that are involved.
For those who want to do something, I always say follow your heart. That's my true belief. It's like follow what you truly are passionate about. Whatever your passion is, you can do that to do good for the world.
I believe that it can be saved because I believe that there can be a mutual relationship between people and the Piedras.
If you're not really into the whole conservation thing, do yourself a favor, just go and check it out. Just go and see it for yourself before you just discount it. Because I guarantee you that we have a massive problem on our hands. and it's going to require a big collaborative effort to find solutions, but it needs to happen quickly.
If we just leave it in 20 years' time, I don't know what's going to happen. This place needs to be safe, because otherwise, if this isn't here, we're not going to be here. You know, we can't breathe money.
We all contribute to the story that's unfolding, the loss of nature, the loss of forests, and how it's ending is up to us. Its fate will be decided in our lifetime.
He's right there.